There we go.
Thank you.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Again, this is Sarah Tober. I'm the Deputy Director here at the La Plata Economic Development Alliance. Here our mission and vision is articulated, and that is to create a vibrant and resilient economy from the recruitment, retainment, and growth of business by fostering public and private partnerships and preserving our quality of life. You might notice that it doesn't say housing, but it is something that we have taken on as an EDO that's recognized the need for workforce housing in this region. Last year, we put out a 3-year investment strategy on workforce housing specifically, one that was done in conjunction with Project Moxie and with Capelli Consultants. And it was clear that there's no entry level product like there needs to be for those lower and middle income ranges. So this is an issue that a lot of EDOs are having to deal with now across the country, especially here in Colorado. So we have created a pretty robust housing program that Sarah Schwartz is leading here at the Alliance. She's also on this call. And yeah, and part of that is standing back up the Regional Housing Alliance and the contract with them, getting them up and moving as an important tool in the housing market here. Another aspect is the Catalyst Fund, which is a pre-development fund that serves La Plata County. And we are, again, looking for workforce housing projects that need some of that pre-development covered that is not typically covered by state funding and grants to help kind of, again, catalyze projects. And we have expanded the rubric to include preservation with that as well. So we have the Catalyst Fund, which is at about $650,000 currently. And we are looking to continue to grow that fund and have around 3 and 4 in 2024. We've currently closed the last round, which I know some of the folks here have submitted for projects here in La Plata County, and we will continue to move this Catalyst Fund forward as much as possible, as well as a renters assistance program that we have with our partner First Southwest Bank. So we are doing a lot of work in this space these days, and are passionate about making sure that our workforce has housing here in La Plata County and has access to housing. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Jen.
Thanks, Sarah. And you have a beautiful, really great website. So all the things you talked about are on the website. So if anybody wants more information, I would recommend that you go to their website. My name is Jen Lopez. I'm a consultant with a company called Project Moxie. I'm based here in Durango. I've been doing housing for over 23 years, and it's always just pure joy to work in my own community. And it's been a pleasure to partner with Sarah and the whole team over at Economic Alliance on these projects. We also have a website if you have interest or questions about what we do. We also have a pretty large team, and I want to thank Lauren and Louise who are on making sure that everything was set up today. But let's get into why people are with us today. So there's been an incredible increase in both need for housing, below market housing, but also in resources in the last couple of years. And frankly, it's very confusing. And so as we've been working with different applicants to the Catalyst Fund, we've heard a number of similar questions in the process. And it comes down to, what do I need to do to be ready to apply for public funds? So this webinar is really going to focus on readiness to proceed, which is a term we use a lot in the field that says we are ready to go in and ask for funding and to receive a funding commitment. Each funder, depending on who you apply to, will have slightly different requirements or requests for information. But there are several activities, kind of threshold action items and documents that are fairly standard across a number of different funders. So the goal today is to really share what we mean by readiness to proceed and to touch base on a number of the new programs in Colorado at a very high level, so that folks have these programs on their radar as they move their projects forward. I think the other thing I'd say on the slide that's really important is funders are always looking to see that the development team has experience and financial capacity They're looking at site constraints, making sure that things have been addressed with the site, and they're wanting to be really comfortable with your cost projections. And oftentimes they're expecting those to come from third parties. We always start with who's applying for the funds. So a number of different resources have different requirements or around applicants and who can apply. But the first thing everybody's going to ask you is, are you a for-profit, a nonprofit, housing authority, or a local government? You're going to have to submit your W-9, a certificate of good standing, other documents to prove your legal status. And again, they're going to be looking at not just what your legal entity is, but who staffs it and if they have experience. They're also looking at what resources your entity has. Oftentimes, development is risky, and they want to know that you've got cash in the bank to fill holes and gaps that are bound to come up in a project. We also often will ask for references, especially if you're not from the area, because we just need to know a little bit about, what you've done prior and how you function in this public funding space. Finally, nonprofits are always going to be asked to show that their boards know that there's been an application for funds, obviously because of the way that nonprofits are managed. Okay, so that's who's applying. Site control, another big one. Funders want to know, are you leasing? Are you going to purchase, or do you already own your site? Are you under contract? If you're under contract, they're going to want to understand any stipulations in your contract. They also are going to want to know if there's any like land use regulatory agreements on your site, meaning this, I know the city of Durango's on, so maybe the city of Durango is providing land to your project. They're going to want to know what the conditions of that donation are and how it might impact the way that the project is funded and operated. And so again, these are pretty standard questions that any funder would request in order to understand where you're at in your process. Also, what kind of project are you doing? Is it new construction? Are you rehabbing existing units? Are you doing adaptive reuse, like a motel conversion, a commercial building, etc.? Each type of project has unique challenges and risks that we're all managing to. And all funders want to know that the project construction and operational costs are realistic again, that you're having a third-party reputable firm providing those cost estimates, and that you're building in appropriate contingencies, right? And so they're looking to see that you've got a feasible pro forma, both to build whatever you're proposing and also to operate if it's multifamily. And I should have said earlier, we've got about 35 slides, a lot of content, and then we would love to open up for a dialogue and questions. And so again, write down your questions or put them in the chat and we'll take them all at once at the end of the presentation. Another big piece at the beginning of a process is clarifying who your target market is. So are you trying to serve, I'm going to keep using La Plata County because this is where we're at, but are you trying to serve folks in Durango or the whole region? Maybe this is a Bayfield project. Maybe this is a, Ignacio project. So, what's the geographical catchment area for your market? And then what kind of household? Is this families? Is it seniors? Is it singles, persons with disabilities, young people, and what incomes are you trying to target? Obviously, that is critical in understanding sort of what the goals of your project are in terms of rent level and purchase price. So all these things are very critical for funders to understand at the application stage. All of them are going to ask for a third-party market study. And again, we have a lot of demand, a lot of need in this area, but that doesn't translate to we want 30 units of 800 square foot townhomes in this location, right? So a market study is a third party consultant that comes in and says, yes, what you're thinking with the incomes and the kind of construction, everything about your project in that location has demand. And so that's why they're important and they're asked for often. There is a shelf life for a market study. So oftentimes we'll see a project get a preliminary market study. It's much cheaper to test their theories and make sure there's demand for the thing that they're trying to do. And then as they get closer to applying for financing, they get the full market study. Again, Catalyst Fund, we have a list of market study folks if anybody's looking for recommendations. And then we will say that, again, if there's a resale control on the project, it does typically impact market demand, and you just want to call that out in your market study scope. Project amenities. This is so important, right? So, um, and it probably comes into play more often with multifamily than single family. But again, this is what are you offering as part of your development? Are you going to have a playground? Maybe you're going to offer childcare space. Maybe there's community services. Maybe you're doing a dog park. So being really clear what you want to offer um, as part of your community development piece. And then we're seeing, of course, accessibility and visitability are becoming more prominent as we have an aging population. So every funding source is going to have requirements around these issues. Again, in these early stages, as you're getting ready to apply, be checking for the requirements and also be thinking about practicality. So if you can do universal design, which is a way to design units that are easily converted for folks who are aging, and there's not a lot of cost increase, you want to do things like that. Huge push, lots more money around energy efficiency. Pay attention because the state of Colorado is changing their rules and becoming more, I don't want to say restrictive, but their expectations are much higher now than they were 3 years ago. And they're also trying to pair that with funds. So energy efficiency is a big box that everybody will need to check if you're going for one of the primary state funding sources we're going to talk about later. There's also some requirements around broadband, making sure that your buildings and your communities are providing broadband, internet access. So again, I think the shortcut with all of these regulations, it can be quite overwhelming, is you want to hire a design professional that understands the state environment and the state regulations as well as the federal, and they will make sure that all of these requirements are met in the design of your project. Community engagement. When you do engagement's really important, and it's something you want to be thinking about pretty early in your project. Funding at the state of Colorado is going to require at least one public meeting. If you're working and you haven't gotten all of your zoning approvals at the local level, you'll also be required to have several public meetings. It's important to think about with these community meetings, being very clear what your project is and what it is not. And it's also very important to be clear what is negotiable, with interested neighbors or community members and what is not, right? So oftentimes we'll have a public meeting and somebody just doesn't want anything built there. Well, that's not the conversation, right? But if the conversation is, yes, we know you're putting in townhomes, but we really want to make sure there's a buffer here, or you're not going to impact our parking. Those are things that we do negotiate often with our neighbors. And then working with local nonprofit partners that have a deep understanding of the folks that you want to serve in your projects will help your community engagement if you engage them in that process with you. Just provides a lot of additional community support and context for the way you're designing your project. Here are a number of the pitfalls we see when folks are getting ready to apply for any number of state funds. Not giving themselves enough lead time. So, and we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the third-party reports that are required. But it can take anywhere from 3, 4, 5 months to get appraisal done, or to get a phase 1 environmental report done, or to have a survey completed. And so again, as you're looking at different funding sources, they will give you a checklist, but these are the things that they're going to be requiring. And I find that you want 4 to 6 months minimum to prepare for a major state application. Other things we see is underestimating costs. And this is, I still do it. I've been doing this 23 years. So it's just something you want to have other people check your assumptions, check your costs. You want to be paying attention to your contingencies, things like that, and making sure that they're robust. Anyone who's developed in the last 3 years, this is with what happened during COVID, we all have that lesson now. So ask us and we'll look at your budgets and make sure that they're robust. The other thing we see a lot is overestimating market demand. And again, yes, there's a need for affordable and workforce housing in many communities, but it doesn't always translate to certain product types. So I always tell folks, if you haven't tried to figure out the market, do that right away. The other thing you want to try to be aware of is these are all extremely competitive funding sources. So for instance, I do a lot with the low-income housing tax credit program, but I'm comfortable saying that a lot of the state programs besides this one are also very competitive. You want to be clear who else is applying from your area. And in a perfect world, you have an RHA like we do, where we can coordinate applications and who's going in. And so we're going to see more and more of this necessity to coordinate these applications so that we can put forth and be most competitive as a region for a project versus having 3 or 4 projects go forth and none of them get funded because we weren't coordinating with one another. The other things we see is if impact fees aren't detailed out appropriately and there's a surprise in an impact fee, those can be hundreds of thousands of dollars. And again, just building in financial cushion, we're seeing a lot of state funds getting awarded and then taking several months to be available. And folks aren't thinking about building in the costs of bridge financing, things like that. So again, when you're working with public funds, they don't move quickly, and you oftentimes will need that bridge support, bridge financing support. And then the last but not least is a lot of folks don't always understand what the red tape is that they're signing up for with public funds. So there's a lot more red tape, and I'll talk a little bit more in detail based on different funding sources. All right, what funding sources are available right now if you're thinking about housing? So we've got a slide on each one of these, and I'm going to keep going because it's a lot of information. Again, just want to put this on your radar and then explain who you might talk to if you're interested in one of these sources. Low-income housing tax credits, that's a federal program we've used very successfully in this part of the state. Those are allocated by CHAFA. I'll talk more about that in a second. We also have federal grants that are given to the state of Colorado that we then apply for. We have HUD home dollars. We have community development block grant dollars. The state of Colorado has what's called HDG, which is the Housing Development Grant Program. This is state funds. Talk about those. And then we have our new Proposition 123 funding. We'll talk about those. So grateful for our local governments. They're stepping in and having to do more funding for housing to make these deals work. We'll talk about that. We also have community development financial institutions. We're lucky in our area, we have access to 3, which is great. There's also congressionally directed spending. We'll explain what that is. And then some limited funding from one-time legislation at the state of Colorado. Okay, again, low-income housing tax credits. High level, we use these to create multifamily rental housing. It's a very complex funding source. It requires lawyers and accountants. It requires an experienced developer or development consultant. The cost to package and apply for these credits can cost anywhere from $100,000 to $250,000. It's a lot of risk to go after these credits, but it's a huge reward if you actually receive an allocation of credit. And developers are interested in this program because they get funded at the beginning of a project. And so there's a lot of incentive there for developers to both go after these funds and do a good job. And then if you're going after tax credits, timing is really critical, and there's very strict deadlines on how quickly you use the credits and how quickly you close. So again, it's a very complex program, but I want to make sure that people understand it's available in our area, it's being used, and it's a common funding source. HUD. HUD funding comes through the Division of Housing. Many of you know Shirley Diaz, who's fantastic. Shirley's the development specialist for our area. Again, federal funds come through the state all the time. And what to be aware of, there's pros and cons of using these HUD resources. So oftentimes they're more restrictive. So you can only use them for certain things. But because they're harder to use, sometimes they're a little bit less competitive, right? So I just had a project last week. I was applying for funds and I considered using federal funds because I knew there would be less competition for them. If you decide to go after federal funds, you want to be careful because there's many more requirements. So there's requirements around getting environmental assessments. You've got to do a lot more public noticing. You have to certify and pay certain wage scales, all kinds of things. And so, and then you want to use the funds for the activities that make the compliance a little easier. So we often see federal funds being used for acquisition of land or simply to subsidize development costs. There is a rule of thumb. The regulations for using federal money costs money. And so we typically rule of thumb say don't go after federal money unless it's more than $1 million. And I know that sounds really wild, but because of the additional requirements, there's a point where it's not going to make sense. So $1 million and over, take a look. And then our team doesn't do a lot of this, but there are consultants out there. You would want to, if you've not used federal funds before, you would want to use a consultant to kind of help you with the checklist and the process. State funding, this is the best money ever. We all love this money. And this money continues to grow. So this is state funds. There's a number of different ways that the state has gotten creative about creating this state funded housing program. And so this is the money that goes first. So Division of Housing, their budget cycle is July to June, and they're already out of these funds for 2024. So, but we want you to be aware of them because, again, we have a legislative session coming. It's possible that there could be more funds in this program sooner than we think. And then, yeah, it's just a great program. So it's called HDG. The state has also provided limited funding through DOLA for infrastructure and some other things. And again, this is pretty new to see so many funding sources come out for housing in the different departments. So Sarah and I joke all the time about it's a full-time job to try to track them all. So just be aware, don't be shy, look up the state website, save a bookmark it and check it often. And we're doing the best we can to let people know about these opportunities as well. And then one more thing, the Division of Housing, again, at the state has multiple departments. So sometimes you'll be applying to more than one department at the state. So for instance, the state of Colorado has a huge amount of housing choice vouchers, and a couple times a year they will provide vouchers for developments. It's primarily targeting special needs housing, but you might go in, ask for vouchers from one department, and then ask for gap funding from another. So multiple departments. And again, Shirley Diaz is your best bet if you have a project in the area and you want to understand what your options are for funding. Again, also, I think Division of Housing does a really good job of updating what we call requests for proposals and requests for applications. There's a couple live right now that you might want to check out. Community development financial institutions were created in the 1990s, and these are funded through the Department of Treasury. I like to think of them as community banks. So they're set up and they're regulated to meet underserved needs in communities. And oftentimes the way the programs work is you'll create, you're providing a financial product, but you're providing that financial product at a discount. And so you might be providing mortgage loans to first-time home buyers. You might be providing below market construction financing, below market permanent financing. You might be doing guarantees. CDFIs, I just think this is the neatest industry, and I was happy to be involved in it early on. And we are, again, so lucky to have multiple CDFIs in our area. So again, Homes Fund has been around for quite a while, about 15 years, and they provide mortgage assistance to make homeownership affordable. They also acquired Mobile Home Park this year and do some other interesting things. They're a great resource. First Southwest Bank is incredible. They've really focused heavily in the USDA rural development funding space and with small businesses, but are starting to move into housing. They also helped with acquisition of a mobile home park and a affordable project in San Miguel County, and so putting them on the radar. And then Impact Development Fund is the largest housing CDFI in the state. They're based out of Fort Collins, Loveland area, but they've been working down here for many, many years. And they do a number of things. So they'll do bridge financing. They'll do, they have Capital Magnets Fund, which is a gap funding source for new construction. Just they provide a number of products. And so just be aware that those resources are available as you're thinking about how to fund your project.
Jen, not
Yeah.
to interrupt you, but we did have a question come through from
Cool.
Eva Henson, and I thought it was timely for you to respond. She asked, do these various funds sources have a certain or recommended set aside for below market units to be eligible? Many might be mixed income with market rate units and not all 100% affordable housing. Just curious.
Yeah, that's a great question, Eva. So yeah, you can take HDG, you can take home, and you can talk to Shirley and say, I've got 50 units, I want to do 10, and absolutely negotiate a grant for a set aside. And there's no hard and fast rules, unfortunately. It really depends on how much funding the state has available. But yeah, they do that all the time. So I wish there was like a per unit amount that we could all plan on, but it's changing rapidly. So anyway, yes, you can ask Shirley how to do it. I think the bigger question is, or the thing to keep in mind is making it worth your time, right? So at a certain amount of money, you know what I mean? Like I would ask for a pretty large chunk because it's going to be a lot of extra paperwork, but yes. All right. Thank you. And Eva could do this slide. Congressional appropriations. I had never done one in all my career until about 2.5 years ago when we worked on the Best Western with the city of Durango, but they're back. And so I want to point this out. They're very competitive, but this is what it is. It's where you work with your local congressional staff. So for us, it's Bennett and Hickenlooper. And typically, so they've done it 2 years, 3 years. So hopefully they'll do it in 24, but they'll put out in usually March feelers for projects that want one-time funding through the congressional budget process. It's called a CDS, Congressionally Directed Spending, and the applications are not hard to do. You put in the application, staff manages it, will let you know. It's about a 1 to 5 in terms of competition. It might be more than that now, but we've done one here for housing, and I've done one in Aurora for housing as well. So it's something to think about. And if you're a project that's already going to use federal funding, you really want to look at this because you're already going to go through the regulatory stuff. So this is like more money. It's just a great funding source. The project here in Durango that Eva managed got $3 million for 120 units. The one I'm working on in Aurora is $3 million for 179 units. Just give people a sense of that. Local government funds. So I'll talk a little bit about this, and then again, we're as a region trying to figure out how to help our local governments with more resources. But typically right now, support might be coming from American Rescue Plan Act funds that a local government has. Or their general fund, it's just their annual budget. And then we want to always do a call out to the local governments for starting the pre-development fund at the Catalyst Fund. And so that's another way that local funds are helping support the work here in the region. I know that the city has an inclusionary zoning program called Fair Share, and they collect some fee in lieu. So they have some funds that they invest in projects. The county has started a very low interest loan fund with some of their ARPA money. And there's not a lot of capital, but there's really great precedents for what they're trying to do with those funds. So I'm optimistic that we'll find ways to put more money in that program. And then there's private activity bonds, which is a kind of a technical funding source that comes out of Treasury as well. And it just allows local communities to access a different kind of tax credit called the 4%. We've used private activity bonds twice in the last 5 years, and it's been really wonderful because we've brought the city and the county together, and it's usually for larger projects or for rehabbing existing multifamily. So residences at Durango use private activity bonds, as did Tamarind Square in its preservation in 2020. All right, here's the punchline. Public funding is gap funding. So I think what's been really hard is sort of these dual messages of there's so much money for housing now. Oh my God, there's so much money. And what do you mean there was 200 applications and 25 got, right? So there's this dissonance happening right now. And so I just want to call out what that is. So yes, we have a lot more funding than we've ever had. And we're going to talk about some more sources here in a minute. But you want to be very clear that the public funding is going to be a piece, and it usually comes in outside of the Catalyst Fund towards the end. So local governments have to see that you've got all the other funding sources before they're going to commit to you. State's going to do the same thing if it's a gap funder. But essentially what I'm trying to say is when private developers come to me and say, show me the money, I say, well, show me your pro forma, because you have to do what you're going to do and you have to understand your costs. And then we work together to figure out if it costs you X and you want to have a discounted rent, how much subsidy is it going to take to make that project work? So the subsidy has been all over the board in terms of the amount. So a year ago, we could count on about 75,000 a unit down here. That's dropping very quickly. And the state, I'll talk about this in a future slide, there's going to be an analysis at the beginning of next year to really look at how much subsidy per unit do they want to set as the bar for rental, for sale, rural, urban, and special needs. So again, this is in flux right now, but I'm optimistic that the state's going to start setting these limits more permanently so we can plan on certain amounts for projects. Again, government sources, yeah, they want to see the private equity and the traditional debt commitments. And then, there's a few exceptions to this. So again, this infrastructure money from DOLA was like manna from heaven, right? It was just an incredible resource. I hope that the state thinks about doing more infrastructure funding because there was a lot of need for it. But in general, again, these funding sources are really gap sources. Right, everybody's talked about Proposition 123. Again, I know I've got a few folks who are maybe not local on the call. Quickly, it dedicates $300 million to affordable housing at the state. The state is using OEDIT, Office of Economic Development, who's contracting to CHAFA and then Division of Housing to administer these funds. And again, what it did is it dropped individual taxpayers' refund by $30 a year or something like that. What does it do? So again, it provides a whole new bucket of funds to make these affordable housing projects work. And the goal when they wrote the proposition was to try to get 10,000 homes built annually. So on the left is Colorado Housing Finance Authority. They are managing the workforce housing funds, and I have a couple slides dedicated to these different programs. And then they are also doing the land banking program. Division of Housing on the right is handling all funds related to homelessness and homeownership. And I have some slides on those as well. All right. Before we do that, though, we do have some local governments on, then I want to make sure that you all know we're in an active letter of interest cycle. So right now, local governments can submit an LOI for capacity building to help implement Prop 123 requirements and to get to your 9% commitment. I just looked at the LOI earlier today. It's land use reform, but it's a lot more than that. There's opportunities to build capacity for grants, some other activities. So just want to put that on everybody's radar to make sure that you can submit and get some funds. In Saratoga, there is an opportunity to apply as a regional entity. So we'll want to coordinate with the city and things like that. All right. Again, who can apply for these capacity funds? Cities, counties, tribal governments, and it's a maximum award of $200,000. You can hire consultants, do staff wages, technology, all kinds of things. And then again, if a couple of communities want to come together and do a regional ask, you can do that too. I have not done this yet, but I suspect we're going to be doing this very soon. So under Prop 123, one of the big things we were trying to solve for in the program was what area median incomes can we target with new funds? And there was a pretty heavy debate last year whether we should use the funds to make our current housing programs work better or if those funds should go for new workforce housing. This is where we landed, and it's pretty interesting. So we can petition as an area by project to have higher AMI limits for a program. So again, if I'm working on a project with the college or somebody's working with a project where you're trying to hit higher incomes, take a look at this petition. You'll have to work with your local government. It's either City of Durango, La Plata County, Bayfield, or Ignacio. And I'm going to show you, there's a list of things that you want to do, but it would allow you to have higher income limits for your program. So in order to do the petition, you have to submit a housing needs assessment. Sarah, I was thinking about our work together. We may have this already, and I know we want new data. And then you'll want to justify why you need this. And then you want to name the specific project that you're requesting the petition for. And so there's a caveat like that communities can do this, but you still, if you want to be competitive, need to fit within the Prop 123 priorities of being high density, mixed income, environmentally sustainable projects. All right, the land banking program was rolled out earlier this fall. And what it does is it provides, provides grants to local governments or forgivable loans to eligible nonprofits that have a history and experience in affordable housing. And it's exactly what you think you can apply to acquire a site. The priorities, again, are high density mixed income. Rental, really, they're looking at this program to acquire land for tax credit projects. And then for home ownership, it's earning up to 100% of AMI. I had an aha moment putting the slides together that we might want to look at whether we could do a petition so we could do rentals at a higher AMI. So we'll probably look into that because that would make some projects very feasible in this area. Again, this is very competitive, but that's okay. We got this. We're pretty organized down here. So I'm very confident we'll have multiple projects submitting over the next year. But yeah, they closed out the LOIs August 21, and they had about 24 million, and they received requests for 255 million. So yes, that's crazy numbers. But remember all these slides we just went through about readiness to proceed? I think there was a lot of LOIs that went in where that there was nothing there. It was like, hey, there's a parking lot next to my building and I'm going to buy it. So that's an assumption, but I'm pretty confident making that assumption because this is a new program and it wasn't a huge lift to put in an LOI. So anyway, here they are. They were selecting projects, readiness to proceed, right? Development plan status, financial feasibility, geographic distribution, dollar amounts, total numbers. So money is out the door this year, but again, they'll be doing it again next year. I don't have any sense of when they'll open up the land banking again. Chris Lopez is the Chaffa Community Relationship Manager here, and I will put his information in the chat. But again, we'll do our best to let people know when these are coming out again. The concessionary debt program opened and closed. This happened really fast. And what this one did is it really was to provide loan options to for-profits, nonprofits, and governments. It was to fill the gap. So honestly, what's been happening the last couple of years is our tax credit projects that we know how to do very well, all of a sudden had huge construction cost increases, anywhere from 30 to 50%, and the deals didn't work. And so a lot of the Prop 123 money in 2023 has been targeted to fill the gap on those projects to make sure they close. So hopefully we're getting caught up on that so that the next projects in 24 and 25 can be a little more creative. We can do stuff without tax credits, things like that. So you'll see here, you can do multifamily debt financing for development or preservation of low and middle income rental developments. Of course, we can use it for tax credits. And this one we got to figure out. So it looks like they're trying to allow for pre-development financing. So I know they got a ton of requests this fall, 38 applications representing more than 113 million. And I feel like they had only 6 or 7 million to do this fall. So again, the funds this year for Prop 123 were half, right? So we were working with half buckets. We'll have a full year of funding next year. I'm going to go quickly over these, but I just want folks to be familiar because we've had a lot of conversations in the community about modular. There are buckets of funding now with OEDIT around funding modular, basically construction in factories. So again, look in, I want to say there's about $40 million out there. So those are active right now, those opportunities for funding. And again, these slides will be made available. And if you have questions, come to Shirley. I'm using Shirley a lot, bless her, she's great. Shirley's a great place to start because she's working for the state, and she can get you to the right department for some of these programs. And then we do have some website links at the end of this. Division of Housing, I had lunch with them last week. They are talking about doing some engagement first before they roll out their 123 programs, which is fabulous. So sounds like first quarter, they're going to be asking for feedback on what the priorities should be for home ownership and for homeless programs, and also trying to understand what the limits or amount per unit should be for these different programs. The homeless programs, I know we have a lot of developers on, but the homeless programs will also fund services, which is really critical for some of our housing projects. And so anyway, I don't see them doing RFPs before March. Again, Shirley is wonderful. I just spelled her name wrong, but we have her contact. We'll make sure that it's right there. The email is correct. If you get on her email list, she does updates often about funding sources, and she'll be in town in a few weeks, I think, because Eva invited her to do a application 101. So I don't know, Eva, if that's open to the public or not, but Shirley's very accessible. All right, here are the links. This is the Chaffa link, this is the DOLA link, here's the Prop 123 link. And I know that was a lot of information and I tend to talk a little fast, but I wanted to make sure we had time for questions. So
we have one question already.
Okay.
Eva also asked, what is a funding source for buyers for below market units with a lower interest rate?
Let me see. I'm going to stop sharing real quick here. So hi, Eva. So let me see. So so I would hope that some of the Prop 123 money could be used creatively. I've heard, I was talking to Elevation Community Land Trust yesterday, and I know that they're playing around with how they might get access to 123 funds to do a interest rate buy down essentially, or some kind of blending of interest rates to create a large mortgage pool that's much more reasonable. So I know that there's conversations happening with them and with Chaff and others, but nothing's been announced. I think it's going to take a little bit. I've been trying to figure out if you can do interest rate buy downs and all of that, and it's really mixed. So, again, Elevation's doing it. So if you're interested, Eva, I'd reach out to them. It seems like they're feeling pretty confident about using second mortgage products like we have with the Homes Fund, but adding on the additional buy down of an interest rate or two and seeing that work for their deals up north. Other folks I've talked to say it's not really the way to go. So I think it's really case by case. And I know that you've got specific homes you're trying to sell. So I don't know if you've talked to them or not, but reach out to, I think ECLT would have some really cool ideas for you. And honestly, if we can't do interest rate buy downs, it's just like everything we've talked about, Eva, before, right? You just have to have more money to buy the unit, right? To do the buy down, which is frustrating. So, more money. Yep. So we're here for you, Eva. Thank you. Let us know what you can help. But I'm optimistic that again, this new Prop 123 money in 2024 should be a resource for all of us to do some more of that. Are there other questions? Thank you, Eva, for all the info. Awesome.
And also the meeting on November 17th is public. I'm going to go ahead and put my email in the chat for anybody who's interested, as Shirley has sent us all a calendar hold, and I can share that with you as well. Yes, they will also have it by Zoom as well. So
are there any other questions? I know, again, that was a lot of information. I think
and we'll
go ahead, Sarah.
And we'll be posting the webinar and the slides onto the RHA website as well. So if you need a second gander at all of it, it'll be there.
Let's see. Eva is that a question? And then I see, hi, Helen from Cortez. Great to have somebody from Cortez with us. If you are somewhat new to this environment around housing and financing, really the name of the game is finding a trusted development partner or consultant. And there's ways to vet folks to come work in your community. But we honestly, I do this work, but I rely on my developers all the time to kind of figure out how these Rubik cube pieces fit together on a capital stack. So again, we can think about buying land and we can think about doing different programs, but at the end of the day, we've got to be very clear with our development partner that the structure we're working on is gonna be financially viable. So I see a number of people on here. If you are working with a development group, great. Make sure they have this information. If you don't have a development partner yet, let us know if you need help finding someone. And even if you're not based in Colorado, I was on a call earlier this morning. We have consultants that work all over the state that can help translate what happens in Colorado. So again, it's very niche-y in our state right now. It's very exciting and it's fast paced. So you want to make sure you got a strong team. Don't know if there's any more questions, Sarah. I'm having a hard time seeing. Oh, here we go.
No,
Thank you.
I
That
don't
was
think we
you.
have any more questions. Yeah, I
Great.
think that'll wrap us up, Jen.
I think so. Well, thanks for joining, everyone. And again, the recording will be on the Economic Alliance website, and we have 2 more in the series. So look at the website and see what we're up to. And the next 2, I probably won't be talking as much. We'll have guest speakers. So anyway, happy Friday, everybody.
Thanks everyone for coming.
Bye.
Bye, Jen.